awake before, now you are, right? When someone asks you or you ask someone, how are you? What answer do you usually get back? What do you expect to get back? How are you? Good, fine. Yeah, you get something like that. When you ask somebody, how are things? What answer do you usually expect to get back? It's maybe good. Yeah. No, for me, I'll tell you just how it works in my life. What I hear, busy. But do you remember 5.5 years ago, I'm sure you do, back to a magical and strange time called COVID, when the world was temporarily closed? Now, I know that during COVID, it was also a terrifying time for a lot of us, and for some of us, it was even a tragic time, but tucked in amidst all the tragedy and the terror, here's what I found to be true, especially for those of us who had families still living under the same roof with us. This is what I heard from people during this time. I heard people saying, for the first time, I've got margin. I finally feel like I've got some balance in my life. I heard people saying, it's just so nice. We're spending time as a family. Or I heard business travelers saying, I used to be a super gajillion black emerald diamond venti, ambassador, and I'm not traveling anywhere this year. I'm just home, and it's incredible, right? Do you remember that? And I thought while we were going through all of that, I thought, man, maybe we're gonna learn something. Maybe we're gonna come out of this and we're gonna live life differently than the trajectory that we've been on for the last few decades as it relates to busyness. But if you fast forward to where we are today, 5.5 years later, I don't know about you, but you look at the state of life and it seems like we're busier than ever. We didn't learn anything. So what happened? You ask yourself that question, what happened? If you imagine yourself back then and you remember how good life felt, the different pace of life, and you think about life now, do you ask yourself the question, what happened? What happened? Did we get bored? Or maybe did we decide that having time to sit and think and eat meals with our loved ones or take long walks, that stuff's overrated, that we'd rather just live chaotic, crazy, busy lives driving up and down Manchester Road and eating fast food in between, right? I don't think so. I don't think we made a conscious decision. Instead, do you know what I think happened? Here's what I think happened. That when the world shut down, it was like suddenly we were all on a level playing field. It's kind of like in NASCAR when they wave the caution flag and everyone's got to slow down and you hold your position. Now, I'll just be honest, I know nothing about NASCAR. I hope I'm doing okay. I just figured we're becoming a NASCAR city, so I should probably learn a few things. But this is kind of what COVID was. Like all of a sudden someone said, hey, hold on. And the race just slowed down and we could take our RPMs down and everyone's holding your position and no one's getting ahead. We're all in it together. But then the moment things opened up again and wave that green flag and you go back to work, you go back to school, you go back to after school activities and sports and all that stuff. What happened in that moment? What happened, I think, is that a fear gripped us that said, oh no, we better, even if we don't like it, we better get back out there and get after it. Otherwise, we will be left behind. Otherwise, we will end up missing out. Today we start a new series, and in this series we're gonna talk about busyness, but we're not gonna give you a bunch of productivity hacks or time management techniques. Instead, we're gonna talk about, because I don't think this is rational. Our busyness clearly is not rational. It's driven from something that is irrational, and we're gonna talk about how so much of our busyness is actually driven by underlying fears. And today we're gonna talk about the fear of missing out. But I'm not gonna call it FOMO because someone told me that's lame and people shouldn't say that anymore. And I'm at the age where I'm at the risk of being lame in everything I do, so we're gonna talk about the fear of missing out. And here's the thing, that the Bible doesn't give us a whole lot. It does give us some about how to live productively or how to manage our time well. It gives us some of that stuff, especially in Proverbs. But the Bible has a whole lot to say about fear and how to live our life not being driven by fear. So today, as we talk about the fear of missing out, we're gonna look at my favorite. I don't have a lot of things that I can say are my favorite thing. This is my favorite parable in all of the scriptures. It is the parable of the prodigal son from Luke chapter 15. If you've never heard it before, you're in for a treat. I think this is a powerful parable. If you have heard it before, I'm just gonna ask God right now to open up your heart and your mind to hear it anew. Luke 15. Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger son said to his father, this is unconventional, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So the father's not even dead yet, but he divided his property between them. Now here's what's powerful about stories, just as we start. Jesus taught in stories all the time, master storyteller, and here's why, because stories have a way of speaking to a very diverse group of people in all different life situations and communicating all kinds of truths to those different situations at once. They're just so powerful. And here, as Jesus begins to tell this story to the crowds of people, you can just imagine all the different people like hearing, okay, father has 2 sons, divided inheritance. And you can believe that there are some people in the crowd that day who are thinking, Rabbi, I know what you're talking about. I bet you're talking about the northern and southern kingdoms of Israel. We heard about this in the last series, that at one point this was all one united nation, and then this nation became divided. The inheritance of the promised land to God's people became divided, and one of those kingdoms, one of those sons was faithful and the other one wasn't. So you can imagine the people saying, I bet this is a lesson on the faithfulness of Judah and the faithlessness of Israel. And then there were some other people, I'm sure, who were sitting in the crowd and they were thinking, no, Rabbi, I think I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the righteous Pharisees, the people who obey the laws and the rules, and you're talking about those sinners who are destroying our country. And that's what this parable is gonna be about. And so they tuned in to listen. All of that, by the way, is very theologically astute. And there are lots of things that we could listen to as we're hearing the rest of this parable. Today, I want to encourage you just to hear these 2 sons as 2 different kinds of people, 2 different temperaments or 2 different personalities that maybe you can identify with. Maybe one of these will speak to you more than the other. And I hope at least one of them will speak to you. Because just like we see in actual families, so weird, isn't it? You have kids with the same DNA, raised by the same parents, and yet they're so different. Here we have the story of these 2 sons who are so different. And again, I hope that one of them just shows you something about yourself. So not long after the division of the inheritance, which is kind of a scandalous thing, the younger son got together all he had and he set off for a distant country. And there, what did he do? He squandered his wealth in wild living. This next verse is just heartbreaking for me. After he had spent everything, this guy squanders his entire inheritance. It is gone in just a short period of time. Like, I've got scarcity issues, so that's terrifying for me. After he had spent everything, there was then a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So much so that he went and he hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. If you don't know a lot about Hebrew people, Jewish people and pigs are not, they don't go together. These are not things that go together. And he longed to fill his stomach with the pods the pigs were eating. Have you ever seen what they feed pigs? Anybody? Like, not the stuff that would ever make you feel hungry, unless you're really in a bad situation. You're starving so badly that suddenly that looks good. And yet the reality was no one gave him anything, not even the pig slop. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and I'll go back to my father and I'll say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. So just make me like one of your hired servants, and that'll be good enough for me. So he got up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father's been watching and waiting. His father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. And he ran to his son and he threw his arms around him and hugged his neck and kissed him. This son who hadn't had a bath in who knows how long, who was emaciated, who had just spent a bunch of time in the field with pigs. This father, this dignified father, throws his arms around his son and he kisses him. And the son says to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said, None of that. Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a signet ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf that you save for like a really big celebration, and let's kill it. Today is the day. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and he's alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Now let's just be honest. This is strange parenting, isn't it? I know we're not in that series anymore. We just left it. But to throw a party for your son who has a partying problem, like this is strange. And not only that, I think it leads us to some questions. A lot of us kind of look at this and we see the son and we see all the things that he did and we see like that wasn't wise and he's been living in sin and he wasted his inheritance and now he's got a freeload off of the father, like with half of the wealth gone or a little less than half the wealth gone, but I won't get an inheritance law. And we look at that and we think, is this father just condoning all of that? The son comes with his confession, saying, I'm no longer worthy to be called a son of yours. And the father's just like, shh, let's have a party. See, if we're not careful, how we can read this is we can read this as a lesson saying, you know what? God doesn't really care about how you live. Your Father in heaven, it doesn't matter to him how you live. We can read this as a license to sin. And I think this is a constant point of confusion amongst Christians, and I hope maybe this will help you. I don't have a lot of time for this. This isn't the whole point of the message, but I got to address it. See, a lot of us, when we see our sin, we imagine that the result of our sin, the problem with sin, is that it triggers divine anger. That God is a holy, righteous God who cannot stand sin. This is what I was taught. And so when we sin, we trigger God's divine anger. He gets angry, and then as a result of his anger, he pours out wrath, pain, and suffering on us. And so if I sin, I'm gonna make God mad, and he's either gonna pour out pain and suffering on me, or he's gonna remove his protection from me, and I'm gonna find myself in a place of pain because I made him mad because of my sin. And you can imagine, you can even hear this thought process going on in the son that we just looked at. He knows what he's done is unwise, it's displeasing, it's dishonorable, it's not faith-filled. And yet he's got nowhere else to go. He's got to go back to his father. He's going to die if he doesn't go home. But as he goes, he imagines that, man, his dad is going to be so angry with him. And so he says, you know what? I'm going to try to head this off. I'm going to say, I know you're angry with me. I deserve your anger. I'm not even worthy to be called your son. Just make me like a hired servant. And I'm ready to take my lumps. Living out the rest of my days, not as your son, but as a hired servant. This is the thought process in his head. But you just heard what happens. It doesn't work this way, does it? The son comes home. The father's not angry. The father embraces him. The father says, let's have a party. And there's not pain and suffering. There's a celebration. Like what's going on there? And again, if we're not careful, we can hear this and we can say, I guess what we do doesn't matter. I guess God doesn't care about our sin. But I want to show you a different way to think about this today. That the problem with our sin isn't that it causes divine anger. The problem with our sin is that it causes pain and suffering. See, that's what sin is. It's the stuff that moves against the way that God created you and he created this world to operate. Sin is a movement against the order that God has established. That's ultimately for blessing, that's for abundance, that's for the goodness of you and for the goodness of the world around you. Sin causes pain and suffering. It's the sin that causes the pain and suffering, not divine punishment. It is the sin itself that causes pain and suffering. So why shouldn't the son go off and spend his inheritance in wild living? Because there's pain and suffering there. It's unwise. And we see that he ends up hurting because of his sin. And then when a God who created us not to live in pain and suffering, but he created us to live in blessing and abundance, when he sees us bringing pain and suffering into our lives, bringing pain and suffering into the lives of other people, you know what happens? He gets angry. He says, this is not how I created my children, my world to be. This is not what I had in mind. And he gets angry, but he doesn't get angry at the people who are sinning. He doesn't get angry at the sinners. What does he do? But he takes out his wrath on sin itself. See, when Jesus came, he didn't come with armies to like mow down sinners, did he? To round up sinners and lock them up. Instead, what do we see in Jesus' ministry? We see sinners flocking to Jesus, and Jesus, just like the Father, embracing them. And if we think about this wrong, it's confusing. It'll give us the wrong message. But that's because Jesus didn't come to release divine wrath on sinners. Jesus came to unleash all divine wrath on sin itself, and on death, and on the devil. See, the problem with sin, and the reason we fear sin, and the reason sin should be taken seriously isn't because it's gonna make God angry, who's then gonna send suffering into the world. When we hear that all the time. That's just not, you can't look at the parable spoken from the words of Jesus of the prodigal son and come to that conclusion. And some of you need to know that right now because you're in pain because of your sin. And there is a knotted mess in your life because of some unwise decisions that you have made. And you might even think like this prodigal son, that your Father in heaven is so angry with you, that he's finished with you, that you're no longer worthy to be called a daughter or son of God anymore. And you're willing to make that bargain, or you're willing to just kind of live the rest of your life as an alien from the family of God. And what I want you to hear today is that your Father in heaven, with the same love that you just saw in the parable, is running after you. He's not angry at you. He's brokenhearted, looking at your pain and suffering, and he wants nothing more than to forgive your sin and to walk with you as you begin to put your life back together in a wise way. His wrath has been poured out on sin, death, and the devil, not on you. You're still his. No matter what you've done, you're still his daughter, you're still his son. You need to hear that today. And then you need to live wisely, because God's calling on us as his sons and daughters is that we would be people who don't bring more pain and suffering into the world. And we do, even though we try really hard, and yet we get up the next day and we don't try to bring more pain and suffering into the world. We're called to bring healing and blessing and hope into the world, amen? Like as sons and daughters of God, we are called to bring heaven down, not called to bring hell up. You hear me? So why does our sin matter? Why should we fear sin? Why should we be vigilant about sin in our life? It's because that's not what we are called to do, to bring pain and suffering into the world. And praise be to God, because Jesus has conquered sin, death, and the devil. We've got an advocate who can help us live wisely, live differently. Now, back to the parable for now. That's kind of a bit of an aside. You can see what kind of guy this younger brother is. He's the guy who can't resist a good time. Like he's the guy who's always searching for more. He's a guy with an endless appetite for fun. He's a guy who just imagines that, there's so much great stuff happening, and he just can't resist. He just can't resist the pull of a good time. But I told you this is really the story about two sons and two temperaments, and we haven't even really looked at the older brother. So let's check in with the older brother. Because maybe while you can't relate exactly to the younger brother, maybe this guy will speak to you. Meanwhile, the older son, where is he? He's in the field. Of course he is. Come on, firstborn children, where are you at? You know how this goes. Often, not always, often in families, the older child is the dutiful child, the child who's responsible, the child who's gonna be where they're supposed to be. It's, curfew, they're home on time, every time. Meanwhile, the older son, he's in the field. He doesn't even know there's a party. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing, like such a hard worker, work before play all day. So he called one of the servants and he asked him what was going on. "Your brother has come," he replied, "and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." The older brother became angry and refused to go in. Now, in our theme this week, What fear am I talking about? The fear of missing out. So I want to ask you, which one of these sons suffers from the fear of missing out? I actually think they both do. Does anyone else see that? It shows up in different ways, but I actually think they both do. It's pretty clear in the younger son. Like he goes out and he's living it up in the world. He can't resist a party. But I also see it here in the older son, the older brother. The same fear operating. And if you don't understand it, maybe I can explain it to how it works in my life with something way less consequential than this. Today I want to talk to you about donuts. Anyone like donuts? I heard someone over there. It's the best response I've gotten from you all morning, by the way, I'm just saying. I try to stay, actually backstage, back in the prep area, someone brought in donuts today, and I try to stay away from donuts. I try to eat less than 5 donuts in a year. But here's the reality. Even though I don't eat donuts, I love donuts. I mean, they're good, but I'm pretty sure they're terrible for you, so I try not to eat them. But then on days like today, or sometimes during the week, get behind me, Satan. It's like, so that happens during the week too. Someone will bring donuts to work, and I'm like, oh no, because I love donuts, but I don't eat donuts. I don't eat donuts very often, and so there's this conflict in me. And then here's what happens: I feel this conflict, and that's just kind of normal. But then I watch my coworkers diving in, eating the donuts. Doesn't matter what time of day, just eating the donuts. And so I watch some eat more. I'm gonna not mention any coworkers by name. Eating the donuts, and it's weird because what wells up in me is not jealousy, it's not temptation. What wells up in me is actually anger. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Like we're all different, but does anyone get this? If you're built like me, you might get this. What I feel is anger. And it sometimes comes out as disgust or moral outrage. How can people eat donuts? They're so bad for you. And I've gotten curious about that in the last few years, being like, why do I get so angry? Like, what is this anger about? And I'll tell you what this anger is about for me, and maybe this will relate for you. For me, underneath that anger is a worry that I might actually be wrong about donuts. That maybe donuts aren't so bad for you after all. That maybe when I get to heaven someday, Jesus will be like, Dion, why they were just donuts. Like, why didn't you just enjoy the donuts? I gave you the donuts, just enjoy the donuts. Because I watch people diving in, and I'm like, what if for them, they can eat all the donuts they want, and there are no consequences that I fear in my life, and they're just eating the donuts, and what if at the end of the day, they're winning, and here I am trying to do the right thing, the responsible thing, the healthy thing, and what if at the end of the day, they're winning, and I'm losing? You hear what's under my anger? My disgust, my moral outrage? It's a fear, right? A fear that man, maybe it doesn't pay to do the right thing. Maybe I'm actually wrong about this. Maybe I'm the one who's not wiser or smarter or healthier. Maybe I'm the one who's just missing out. Now that won't connect with all of you, but it'll connect with some of you. You who, like the dutiful older brother, have just learned to stay home because that's the right thing to do. That's the responsible thing to do. That's the respectful thing to do. And yet, in your heart, there's not joy there in staying at home. There's not an ownership over this decision to be like, you know what, I'm doing the healthy thing. This is great. Praise God. There's a resentment that's building up in you. There's a joylessness. There's an anger. For some of you, you understand the prodigal son, the younger brother completely. That's how the fear of missing out plays out in your life. For some of you, it plays out differently like the older brother. And I just want you to take a moment right now and just examine yourself and say, how is this fear playing itself out in my life? Is this the root cause of all the chaos in your life, the frenetic activity, the I can't sit still, I'm doing the next thing, I'm overscheduled, I'm overburdened, that's ultimately gonna lead you to ruin? Or is this fear playing it out in your life like the older brother? You're doing all the right things, you're following all the rules, you're doing the right thing, but inside, instead of joy, instead of peace, there's anger and there's outrage. There's a dryness in your spirit. See, regardless, I want you to see how the father responds to the older son now. We saw he responded to the younger son. Saw him coming a long way off. He ran, put his arms around him, hugged him, kissed him. Said, let's have a party. You're no slave. You're my son. Now the father went out, left the party that he's the host of, and he pleaded with his older son. I love the heart of the father there. Again, a father who pursues. And if you don't know God, the father, as a passionate pursuer of all of his children, then you don't know him as he is, because this is who he is. He runs after the son. He comes out and he pleads with the other son. But the son answered his father, look, all these years, here, listen to it. All these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. Do you hear the fear of missing out there, by the way? Like maybe I've been doing all the right things, and maybe I'm missing out. Maybe it does really pay to be an idiot like my younger brother. My son, the father said to him, my son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and he's alive again. He was lost and is found. Here's the word that I wanna leave you with as we walk away from this parable. There's so many rich takeaways. Here's the one I wanna leave you with today. There is a richness in staying home. My son, you are always with me and all I have is yours. There is a richness in staying home. And I mean this like figuratively, theologically, spiritually, and I also mean it practically. Let me talk about this from a theological standpoint. There is a richness in staying home. That means for those of you who, like the older brother, are kind of going to a place of resentment when you look around the world at other people who aren't doing the right thing, aren't doing what they should do, because the older son was doing the right thing, but there's no joy in you doing the right thing anymore. Can you just remember that there's nothing greater in all of the world than being with your father? Can you let your heart feel that first love again? Can you remember that there's nothing better than living under the roof of your father, under his rules, under his ways, that is truly the blessed way to live? Can you remember that godliness is its own reward? Can you remember that your father is fair and just? For those of you who are a little more like the younger brother, can you believe there's a richness in staying home, that a rich life isn't found in the next adventure, in the next thing, in the next pursuit, in the next activity? That true richness in life isn't found in its breadth, but in its depth? And can you believe that just being with your father, of all the things you can pursue in this world, being with your father, living according to his rules, under his roof, in his house, in his presence, that's the key to true richness? Can you find contentment there? Instead of always noticing what's missing, can you pay attention to what's present? And in your father, you have everything your heart desires. There's a richness in staying home. And today, my hope for you, no matter which kind of son you identify with more, or maybe none of them exactly, is that you realize that in all of the world, there's nothing greater than what God gives you in a relationship with himself. And if it's not satisfying to you right now, it's not because you need to add something more, it's because you haven't gone deep enough yet. So keep going deeper, spend more time, dwell with your father until your heart is full. dig a little deeper, drill a little deeper, because there is a richness in staying home. But now as I wrap up, I told you this has a more literal, practical consideration too. Literally, there is a richness in staying home. And the reason we don't like to stay home is because it's boring. But today, as we close, I want you to watch this video because being bored might be exactly what you need. Take a look.
You need to be bored. You will have less meaning and you will be more depressed if you never are bored. I mean, it couldn't be clearer. Let me give you the good side of boredom in general. Boredom is a tendency for us to not be occupied otherwise cognitively, which switches over our thinking system to use a part of our brain that's called the default mode network. That sounds fancy. It's really not. The default mode network is a bunch of structures in your brain that switch on when you don't have anything else to think about. So you forgot your phone and you're sitting in a light, for example. That's when your default mode network goes on. We don't like it. My colleague in the psychology department here at Harvard, Dan Gilbert, he did experiments where people had to sit in a room for 15 minutes with instructions to do absolutely nothing, and there was nothing in the room to do except there was a button in front of them that they could push, and if they did, they gave themselves a painful electric shock. Sit there bored or get a shock. A big majority of the participants gave themselves shocks instead of thinking about nothing. We don't like boredom. Boredom's terrible. Why is boredom so bad? Well, because the default mode network makes us think about things that might be kind of uncomfortable. When you think about nothing, well, your mind wanders and thinks about, for example, big questions of meaning in your life. What does my life mean? You go to kind of uncomfortable existential questions when you're bored. That turns out to be incredibly important, incredibly good. One of the reasons that we have such an explosion of depression and anxiety in our society today is because people actually don't know the meaning of their lives, much less so in previous generations. Tons of data show this. And furthermore, we're not even looking. Why not? I'll tell you why not. We figured out a way to eliminate boredom. We've been able almost completely to shut off the default mode network in our brains. How? The answer is that thing in your pocket with the screen, which you take out even when you're standing on the street corner waiting for the light to change, is like, I might have to wait here for 15 seconds. What are you doing? You're actually trying to not be bored because the default mode network is mildly uncomfortable because it sends you to the types of questions that you can't get your mind around, you can't get your arms around. Well, that's a big problem. That's a doom loop of meaning. If every time you're slightly bored, you pull out your phone, it's gonna get harder and harder for you to find meaning, and that's the recipe for depression and anxiety and a sense of hollowness, which, by the way, are all through the roof. I get it. You don't wanna be bored. You need to be bored. Be bored more. Tomorrow, when you go to the gym in the morning after you wake up, don't take your phone. Can you handle it? Not listening to a podcast while you're working out? Just being in your head? I promise you'll have your most interesting ideas while you're working out without devices. It's probably been a long time since you've done that. Commute with nothing, not even the radio. Can you do that? Start getting better at periods that are 15 minutes and longer of boredom and watch your life change. Number one, you'll be less bored with ordinary things in your life. If you get better at the skill of boredom, you'll be less bored with your job. You'll be less bored with your relationships. You'll be less bored with the things that are going on around you. But more importantly, you'll start digging into the biggest questions in your life: purpose, meaning, coherence, significance. And who knows, you might just get happier.
Thank you for joining us today and being a part of our online Pathfinder Church community.
That's right. And if you're new here, you can find some helpful links to resources in the description below or at pathfinderstl.org.
And while you're there, you can also find our message podcast, which allows you to listen to all of our weekend messages all the way back to the beginning of time.
Forever.
Or the new one next week.
That's
wherever
right.
you are, whatever you're doing, you'll never miss out on a message from us.
I don't want to miss out on any, so I'm really
Don't.
glad that we have that. And also just, social engagement, share this message, bless other people, hit that subscribe button, like, comment. Every single interaction that we have helps us spread the message of Jesus.
Finally, if you'd like to support our ministry with a gift, you can do that at pathfinderstl.org/giving. It's your generosity that fuels our work here at Pathfinder Church.
Have a great week, everyone, and thanks for being here. God bless.